Is there life after death? Do near-death experiences prove the existence of God? In this video, we're going to be discussing those topics. We're going to be reviewing the D'Souza-Baker debate where they touch on this subject. Hi, my name's Todd, and welcome to Mission Millennial Z Alpha Generations, where we share the other side of the creation story with today's youth. Now, in this video, we're going to be talking about near-death experiences and why I think in this brief excerpt from a debate, I haven't watched the whole debate, by the way. I think I will in time, but it's just not the squeakiest wheel right now for me to deal with. But in this brief excerpt that I got off of Facebook, we'll find that in reality, on the subject of near-death experiences, I think Baker, the atheist, got the better of D'Souza in this particular excerpt. Again, there may be more information that D'Souza came back with, but Baker brought up a powerful argument I never heard before. And again, as a sort of like disclaimer, I myself am agnostic on the subject of whether near-death experiences prove the existence of a theistic God. Now, let's touch base on this briefly, because it's a brief video, but I think it's very telling if you look at how D'Souza defined the terms, which I think was his major mistake, which Baker jumps on. See what you think. Let's look at it.
Live on in any immaterial soul spiritual way. That is just a myth. That is a lie. That is wishful thinking. And if you're basing your life on that, you're wasting precious time of the real life that we have as biological animals in this natural.
Well, first of all, science shows that those who are religious typically live longer than those who are irreligious, those who are serious about it, right? So is it a waste of time if you take Pascal's wager and act as if God does exist and live a life accordingly of morality? No, but it's a side point. I just want to touch base on that. Let's get back to the debate.
Environment. Truth of it is, you set aside Jesus Christ, no one knows what comes after death.
I also want to make a brief comment on that. He's right. D'Souza's right. And I like D'Souza, by the way. I'm not dissing him because he may have messed up on this presentation on life after death. I'm not dissing him at all. I've watched a few of his things in the past, and I think he's a very intelligent guy. But he's right. Jesus Christ is the only way we can know whether there's truly life after death. And I'm not going to touch on that here. If you look in the description, there's a link to my audio track, Jesus, Myth or Savior. So if you want more information on that, just open up that link. I think you might appreciate that article. All right, let's get back to the debate.
So it's very interesting that you here have Dan, a champion of reason, who has to admit that he has no idea what comes after death, just as the caterpillar has no idea it's going to become a butterfly. And yet Dan states as a factual matter, it's a myth, it's a lie. Why would somebody be so passionate about something that they have absolutely no information about? I would suggest that Dan is taking a faith-based rejection of life after death. In other words, Dan doesn't want there to be a life after death. Why? And we forget this. He keeps telling us believers want to live forever. Atheists don't want to live forever. Why? Because nobody wants to be judged for their actions. If there is a death, there may well be a last judgment. Or even in other religions, there's cosmic justice. So there's, in a way, for many people, a desire to avoid moral accountability. And therefore, they will profess as fact something that they do not know to be a fact. In reality, there's actually some powerful indication.
I just want to make a brief comment on this too, which is a side point. I think it's wrong-headed to judge the person you're debating with as judge their motives, that Dan or all atheists don't want there to be a life after death. Now, there's some atheists who come out and explicitly say that. I deal with that in other videos. But you can't make a categorical judgment. if you Christians, you theists don't like when people categorically judge your motives, then don't do it to others. Simple as that, the golden rule. All right, let's get back.
There is life after death. I go into these in a recent book of mine. I'm not going to belabor the arguments now. The little empirical evidence we do have, and that is these near-death experiences, people who are not dead, but very close to death. They have cardiac arrest, their brain has stopped showing any signs of activity, and yet they report experience. They're conscious. They say they are pulled through a tunnel. They see a bright light. They feel their life come before them. They encounter deceased relatives and friends. They are in the presence of a celestial being. There are thousands of these near-death experiences reported all over the world. They're taking place right now. And if they are true, if all these people aren't conspiring and all lying, and frankly, no one thinks they are, the truth of it is that shows that consciousness and experience can survive the breakdown of your bodily functions. That's empirical evidence. The atheists have no evidence. They don't want there to be life after death, so it's only wishful thinking on their part that there should be no last judgment and no life after death. At the very least, I wish they'd just step back and say they don't have a clue.
I would like there to be life after death. I never said that. I think it would be fascinating if that were true, to extend our lives. I think.
So why do you say it's a lie when you have no idea one way or the other?
Because what does death mean, right? You mean the death of the body. Your evidence is not evidence for life after death. It's a near-death experience.
So Baker went right after D'Souza's terminology, near death. So this shows the importance of defining your terms in a debate, especially a formal debate, where you're out in front of a bunch of people where you can get embarrassed, or even in just casual conversations. Define your terms. Technically, near-death experiences is a floating term. These people are actually dead. According to non-theistic scientists, they're dead, okay? But to call it a near-death experience, I think it's just an accommodative type of term because these people do come back, all right? So Baker was wise to jump on it. But he's also wise to bring up this following point that I never heard before. Let's listen to it.
Cross any line with these near-death experiences. They're evidence for something going on in our mind. In fact, you know that these same chemicals that are released to the brain when people are dying, these opioids and endorphins, have been administered to people who are not dead, and under the experience of these opioids, they had near-death experiences. The brain hallucinates, and when the brain goes, it's fighting to live, and it does hallucinate in all these ways and has these interesting facts. Even atheists will have near-death experiences and not think it's Jesus. A Muslim will see Allah, right? A Christian will see Jesus, and atheists, who knows? We see a blank piece of paper, I suppose. But the what you just gave us is not evidence for life after death.
Okay, there you have it. I watched a number of these near-death experiences used as proof for Christianity or theism before, and I never heard the argument Baker brought up. Did Baker just create that argument out of whole cloth that it's not true? Did scientists really take those chemicals at near death, and how did they get them at near death? Did they take those chemicals and put them in people that, like, say if they put them in me or you, and we would start thinking, oh, we see Jesus, we see this heavenly light, we see this light at the end of the tunnel. Would we see those things? Hey, I'd like to have that. That'd be a great experience, right? So I was listening with bated breath to what D'Souza would say in answer to what Baker brought up. And D'Souza did touch on it, but he didn't answer it directly. Maybe you can figure out, let me know in the comment section if you can figure out if D'Souza's rebuttal actually touched on Dan Baker's point. Let's see.
Evidence for how the brain functions near death. And if there's a life after, and if there's a judgment, if there's a God, I'm not fighting that. I'm not afraid of moral restrictions. I'm not afraid of being judged. If I'm going to be judged, fine, I'll own up to my judgment. I don't want somebody else paying the death penalty for my actions. We atheists are responsible and mature about this. And in spite of the fact that I might wish to live forever, I'm going to stick with what we do know. And we do not know at this point, beyond what some holy book tells us, that there's any life after death.
Well, you say that there is a prevailing theory, which I discussed at some length. It's called the dying brain hypothesis. And that is, it tries to explain the near-death experiences by saying that when your brain is dying, it goes into shutdown mode, and it has these experiences of a tunnel of bright light, but it's just special effects generated by the dying brain. There's one serious problem with this hypothesis that has never been answered. There are tens of thousands of people who have had near-death experiences. Where are they now? Answer, they're walking around. They're going to work. They have families. They drive cars. So if their brains have died, the dying brain in the process of shutting down has generated the near-death experience, how has their brain reversed the entire process, evidently healed itself, so it's now functioning completely normally?
I don't get it. Maybe it's just me. I don't see his point. He's saying, Baker says they can take these chemicals and inject them into people who aren't near death, and they have the same experiences as those who are near death. That's his point. And D'Souza, I just don't get it. Maybe you can help me out.
Sort of like saying, I've turned off the car, I've taken the key out, and the car is still running. So the truth of it is these near-death experiences cannot be so easily dismissed. Dan is trying to dismiss them by saying, look, the only evidence I'll accept is if a dead guy gets out of the coffin, shows up at his funeral, and gives the tribute to himself. True, we don't have that kind of evidence. The near-death experience is the closest people come to death. Many of these people are clinically dead. They should not be having experience, and yet they do. So what gets me is the atheists are always asking for facts. Give us experience. Don't cite the Bible.
Okay, that pretty much sums up the debate. It goes on for a few more seconds, but nothing significant. Perhaps we'll deal with this in a part 2 if I watch the whole Baker-D'Souza debate. Again, just as in review, I think that near-death experiences are not a super good argument for the Christian faith. You know, when there's so many better arguments to use. If you're a Christian or a theist and you're using that argument, bear in mind, one of the reasons why I'm agnostic about the issue, it seems to me from the different videos I watch from proponents of near-death experiences, these experiences transcend the Christian doctrine. There are people who are not Christians that have positive experiences. And if you go by fundamental doctrine of the Christian faith, what happens when you die, at the moment you die, if you're outside of Christ, you know, these are the type of things we need to grapple with. But why use it? You know, it's an interesting topic. And I'm going to look into Dan's point, because if Dan's point about they can take those chemicals and inject them into people who are not near death, and they can have the same experiences, why aren't the proponents of near-death experiences taking that head on? Anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you do, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to this channel and pass it on to others you think might be interested in origins, especially youth, especially the youth who are being mostly indoctrinated into naturalism. Anyway, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, that's what this ministry is all about, reaching out to those, but even those beyond that. So I hope you have a good day, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.